situation. There's a...
Al didn't come in after that spin, and apparently it's cost him as he limps back to the pits now. And the hope is that he'll make it back and not damage the car along the way.
Yeah, keep in mind, the bottom of that car is really dragging bottom. That isn't too good on it right there.
Again, we'll look back. Again, Danny Sullivan's in car. See if we can get it all the way into the corner this time.
You see that little Al was slowed there. That must have triggered Danny's decision to make a move. He just cut that tire with his right front wing.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, Sam. The right
But
front
also,
wing.
Bobby, you see why Danny made the move, because little Al had made a mistake in the turn before. Danny'd been behind him for several laps, and in frustration, he chose that moment to make an attempt.
So Al Unser Jr. limps back into the pits, losing positions along the way after his confrontation with Danny Sullivan. Gary Gerald, are you there?
Indeed, Paul. A quick update on Scott Goodyear. Started 5th, was running in the top 10, had contact in traffic. This was the result, and the right rear had to make an extra pit stop back in 15th place, trying to work his way forward. Another frustrating day for the popular young Canadian. He's going to Toronto next week, hoping for better fortune.
Another thing, just so people know, Paul and Gary, is there are no tubes in these tires. They're tubeless. They're very thin. They have no more rubber on them than enough to just barely cover the treads that make up the tire. And that's all. They're very thin tires.
Well, an interesting race thus far. We're past the halfway point as Al Unser Jr. rolls for the pits. At the start of the race, a battle between Paul Tracy, the pole sitter, and Nigel Mansell, a multi-car accident on the start. That brought out the yellows, eliminated Roberto Guerrero and Bobby Rahal. Finally, Paul Tracy was able to overhaul Nigel Mansell and has led ever since. They've been through the first round of pit stops. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. World, the last African flying boat, an all-new special. Then, after America's Funniest Hour, Sylvester Stallone and Donald Sutherland star in Lockup, the Sunday night movie, all tonight on ABC. Right now, though, it's IndyCar racing, the Cleveland Grand Prix, presented by Goodyear. And Raul Boisel has flattened a tire. He was running in the front of this order up in 6th place.
Boisel, however, has very good news, which is that his car owner, Dick Simon, has done a contract with the car's sponsor for 3 years. The first multiple-year contract that Simon has ever had, and I think it speaks very well for the future of Raul Boisel, who, of course, runs second in the championship points now.
Without doubt, that's been one of the fastest teams all year. Boisel and Simon are making a good team.
Now remember, Danny Sullivan involved in that confrontation with Al Unser Jr. Let's go to Jack Arute for an update.
Well, Paul, this is the nose piece off of Danny Sullivan's car. Looks fine over here, but look over to the right. There's nothing left. Now remember, these cost about $14,000 a copy. So that was an expensive shunt with his teammate. Now, just moments ago, Ed Nathman, who calls the shots for Danny Sullivan, and his owner, and the man that calls the shots for Al Unser Jr., had words where I stand right now. Couldn't tell you what they said, but they weren't very happy campers.
Of course, that confrontation with that nose ended up cutting Al Unser Jr.'s left rear and sending him into the pits as well.
Well, you know, often you can see how tenseful it gets within teams. You're talking about, now this is Rick Gallus's team. You're talking about Ed Nathan working for Rick Gallus, but he's running Danny Sullivan. So you can see, people can see that competition in teams are often just as serious as it is between other teams.
Maybe more bitter, really, because the first order of business is to beat the other guy on your team and then let the chips fall where they may overall.
The interval first to second, as we continue with our look at the running order after 50 laps, remains about the same, 10 to 11 seconds at the front of the field between the leader Paul Tracy and second place Nigel Mansell, with Emerson Fittipaldi continuing his strategy of just waiting race. Boisel's tires smoking. Now you see why they wear the Nomex gloves when they change the tires. The surface so hot after he drug it across the race course, limping back into the pits. Boisel has completed more than 942 laps. That's more than any other driver this season. He continues to be wonderfully consistent. Paul Tracy pulls up on the back of Mario Andretti, trying to lap the 5th place car of Andretti.
Now, one of the things that might be worth noting right now, where pit stops always seem to make a difference on the races, all the cars that I can count right now are going to have to make one more pit stop, with the exception, again, of Al Jr. because of his flat tire. And Boisel, he just made his. Because of the flat tires, they have come in and made their tire change and fuel at the same time, so they'll go on, so they'll naturally jump up in the standings towards the last, Paul.
Well, as you saw in the race summary, they are averaging about 124 miles an hour. Race record, in fact, the fastest road race in IndyCar history, run here last year and won by Fittipaldi at 133 miles an hour. So with those early yellow laps, they're well behind that pace. Keeping an eye on Paul Tracy, no battle at the front of the field. You know, some people significant to the development of this race here in Cleveland are with Gary Gerald. We can talk with some of them now.
Well, Paul, down here we have the opportunity to chat for a moment with Mark McCormick, the chairman of IMG International Management Group, that is promoting this event. And there was a danger, Mark, of this event leaving Cleveland. Your group, headquartered here, has stepped in and kind of saved the day, and it looks like everybody's really excited about the outcome.
Well, there's no way we could let this event leave Cleveland. It's a great city. It's one that we started in and we're really proud of, and we're delighted to be able to contribute in some small way to such a great community.
And the mayor, Michael White, also alongside, and I know it has to be exciting for you and your administration to make sure that this race stays alive in Cleveland by the lake.
Well, Gary, it is exciting. As you can see, there are thousands of people here. This will tell the Cleveland story all over the world. We think it's a great story, and we're glad to be doing this with IMG.
Well, we're all happy to be here. Paul?
Of course, Mark McCormick, once named the most powerful man in sports by Sports Illustrated magazine. IndyCar is certainly happy to have him involved, too. His first scored on Long Beach. He's been running very smooth and unchallenged by anyone the last few laps.
You figure Paul Tracy has really been on trial ever since he was picked up by the Penske organization a couple of years ago. And earlier this year, mistake after mistake, taken out of the lead twice when he made ill-advised moves in traffic. We began to wonder if he had a future with Penske. And even today, rumors of all kinds circulate. Tracy out to be replaced by any number of other drivers. But it's this kind of performance which Paul Tracy is quite capable of, pulling away easily and defeating everyone, Nigel Mansell, the reigning world champion, included. And it makes you very tempted to keep your hands on a man who can do this kind of thing for you. He's having a beautiful race.
Jack Arute, more on Paul Tracy.
Well, Sam Posey, as an addendum to that, uncharacteristically, Roger Penske has not been on the radio that often with his driver, Paul Tracy. He's really let Tracy have his head today, at least what he is saying into Tracy's ears.
Well, Jack, it's always a question of, is a guy a learner? And for a while there, the idea was that Paul Tracy wasn't really learning very fast. He was continuing to make mistakes. All of a sudden, we see a real reversal of that. Paul Tracy seems to be learning, really getting his act together. If he does manage to avoid mistakes in his driving, well, he's one of the best men out here, maybe the best.
So at the front of the field is Paul Tracy, then Nigel, and then Emerson Fittipaldi, and in fourth place is Teo Fabi, driving for Jim Hall. Bobby, who has been struggling with the car, there he is. He's been struggling getting this machine up to full speed. Of course, Bobby, we're talking a team that doesn't test quite as often as many of the others.
Well, they don't, Paul, but by the same token, I think they've been recognizing that. And the owner of this team is, of course, none other than Jim Hall, the guy that's famous for the Chaparral car many years ago, where testing and development were an integral part of the sport. Now, for some reason or another, they don't test. And probably money is the reason they don't test. But Jim is recognizing that. He's hiring now engineers to help him do the thinking because he's an engineer himself. The car is definitely going better. Teo Fabi is quite a good race driver. So it's all starting to show up because they're at least working harder on it. I think they just need to do what you said, test a little bit more.
Of course, you mentioned testing is expensive. For the past couple of years, there have been a number of conversations about how to reduce the testing so that it doesn't cost the teams as much. Is there any successful way to do that you can see, Bobby?
Well, there isn't. The only successful way is to change the rules. Now, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has been contemplating forcing a rule change in the cart because they just need to get everything costing cheaper. An engine package is roughly $1.5 million a year. We talk about parts costing a cover for the engine $25,000. Just continue on, and you've got a car that's costing $300,000, and it's too much. They don't look any better to the people. They just need to make them cheaper so guys like this can afford to do more development work in testing.
Everybody, of course, if you're a car owner, looks at NASCAR and says, hey, look at how competitive that is, and it's much cheaper. But I still feel that part of the heart and soul of IndyCar racing is its technology and the development, and I would hate to see it throttle back too much in that way. Don't you agree, Bobby?
Well, I think so, Sam, but it could come back an awful lot of way before it make any difference.
Correct. There is the relationship between the leader, Paul Tracy, and Nigel Mansell, who pursues him. well back. Now you wonder, is Mansell suffering? Here he comes here. Is Mansell suffering from problems shifting the car? He is not as aggressive as he was earlier. See Bosell there briefly in the center of the screen. And Mansell currently 15 seconds back, not attacking at all.
Considerable distance back to the red number 5. 14 seconds now between Paul Tracy and Nigel Mansell. Again, you have to ask yourself about the injured right wrist. You also have to agree that this is a driver. As Paul Tracy heads down for the pits, this should be routine. But you're talking to Nigel Mansell, a very savvy guy who knows how to run these races despite the fact he's never driven here. Jack Arute waits for Paul Tracy.
And the Penske operation waits for his arrival. As he comes, he hits the marks precisely, and the crew goes to work. Jerry Briand on the right rear. They're just going to change all 4 tires, and they will take the fuel. They have, again, made no changes on this car. Tracy looks at his crew chief, and in 14.91 seconds, he is off and away in Paul, what should be his final stop of the day.
Tim bumps the crew chief on that car. Almost a casual walk away from the car. What a well-orchestrated pit stop. No hurry up at all in it.
In tennis, they have a term for that. It's called a cash. That was just a cash of a pit stop. But, of course, it was just perfect, too.
What will we do without you, Sam? Bobby, you've got that term now. It's on your log, right?
I hope you don't force me to remember it, but I'll try my best, Paul.
So with the leader, Paul Tracy, making his stop, it gives the lead over to this car, number 5. But, of course, he's the leader on the race course. He should be stopping shortly himself. We'll keep an eye on Nigel Mansell. Again, this team has been brave on their pit stops. Occasionally, they'll carry him a bit further. But, of course, Nigel Mansell is on the pit road. Stefan Johansson is also on the pit road as well. A long pit lane to negotiate for Nigel Mansell, and he's doing it slowly and carefully, being very conscious of that pit speed. Gary Gerald waits for him.
We look for the nose of the car. Now it's in sight. He glides in. Remember, this whole business of numerous pit stops in a race, something new this year for this reigning Formula One world champion. A brief respite now for that ailing right wrist. They don't expect any changes. He's not made any word on the radio about any discomfort with this wrist. They finished the refueling. He's down and away. 15 seconds. Let's go to Jack Arute.
A little bit longer stop for Emerson Fittipaldi, but the reason, Paul Page, was they wanted to make absolutely certain that they took a full tank of fuel. They did. He's away.
And Fittipaldi got out behind Mansell. Still haven't cleared that cone off the course, Bobby.
No, there's been no yellows, and you notice that nobody's hit it either.
So with the front of the order, somebody hit it to get it out there, Bobby. The front of the order changes as they go through the second and what should be the final pit